안녕하세요, 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌리입니다. I'm a Korean teacher who's been learning Korean for over 2 decades now and teaching it here on YouTube for over 13 years. And I recently asked my Patreon supporters what Korean group I should take a look at. And most of you suggested the group MONSTA X.
몬스타 X! 안녕하세요! 몬스타 X입니다!
This group has 6 members and they're SHOWNU, 민혁, Kiyeon, Hyun-woo, Juhun, and I am. And I spent more than 3 weeks filling up my YouTube watch history with nothing but MONSTA X videos for research purposes. So now I think that I'm ready to share with you my full analysis of how each member speaks in Korean. This is information that you're definitely missing out on if you don't understand Korean. So I'll be sharing all of that with you. I'll be breaking down how each of them sounds in Korean, including any unique expressions and any dialect they use. And spoiler alert, several members use dialect, and it's pretty funny.
뭐야, 어떻게 왜 보여?
선생님 상추가 나는 치아 미백에 좋다는 얘기를 한 번도 들어본 적이 없어.
됐나 이제 막 궁금증이 막 송송송 해결되구나.
As well as I'll be analyzing everything about their speech that just stands out to me as a Korean teacher. And a lot stands out. But before we do all of that, first I want to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, my Patreon supporters, and also my YouTube channel members. Because of you, I don't have to put lots of sponsor segments in this video series. Although I will say that if you're not already supporting me on Patreon, please do that if you can. It really helps me to make these videos as well as my other Korean learning content. So please check out the link to my Patreon page in the description, and you'll also get some cool benefits when you join. For example, you can help choose what should be the next group that I'll analyze on this channel. Okay, so let's start by first introducing the group MONSTA X, which first debuted in 2005 from the company Starship Entertainment. Starship is also the home of other major artists like Sistar, Mad Clown, and many more. And the name MONSTA X is a combination of the word mon, meaning my in French, and star, meaning my star. And no, that's not a JoJo reference. And monsta also sounds like the Korean word monsta, meaning monster. So their group name has several meanings. And their fan name, mon-bebe, also uses French and is a combination of, again, mon with bebe, the French word for baby. So mon-bebe, my baby. Anyway, they have 6 members and each will get their own video in this series, starting with the oldest member, SHOWNU. So SHOWNU, whose Korean name is Son Hyun-woo, or as he says, 손, meaning hand, hyun-woo.
손현우.
SHOWNU was born in June of 1992 in the city of Seoul. And as the oldest member, he's the leader of the group, but he's also the main dancer. Now, before debuting with MONSTA X, SHOWNU was a trainee at JYP Entertainment, and he was also a backup dancer there. In fact, his name, SHOWNU, is short for show and new, meaning a brand new show. And it came from back when he was in a group project called New Boys, or in Korean, New Boys, in 2014, together with 3 other artists, including one of them, Juhun. So before we talk about SHOWNU's speech and filler words and his handwriting and all of that, let's just talk about my first impressions. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to be sharing just a few clips from my research because I don't want this video to get taken down, but I do have a few clips that I want to share first, so let's watch those.
바람이 불어가지고 어디서 바람이 불어? 저 에어컨 사이로 바람이 불어가지고
스프링클 갈게요.
저한 거네.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god. Is that marshmallow? Wow. Wow.
Now, it might not be obvious if you don't already speak Korean, but SHOWNU has a good sense of humor. Now, he's not telling dad jokes or constantly like doing overly goofy things or anything like that. In fact, he just has this carefree and very playful personality that I think comes across as pretty humorous. And he's also really good at reading the room and behaving just playfully enough that it makes him come across as funny. Now, he actually does that thing he did with the candle. He does that thing a lot. and I have no clue how he does it, but I did find several cases of him doing that. But it's not only me who thinks this, and I am also agreed that he feels the same way in this clip that I found from 2021.
가장 재밌는 멤버는 저는 개인적으로 션우 형이라고 생각을 해요. 뭔가 이걸 노리지를 않는데 다른 사람이 보기에는 너무 웃기고 진짜 뭐랄까요? 앞으로가 궁금해지는 사람.
Anyway, but none of that is related to his Korean. So, my first impression related to his Korean speaking that I had is that he speaks really straightforward and he seems very composed and very mature. And while researching for this video, I came across a clip back from the show Weekly Idol back in 2020 that I want to show you. So here's that clip first.
애늙은이.
저희가 이제 표현 이제 여기 스케줄 오려면 메이크업이랑 이제 헤어를 하잖아요. 그것도 메이크업이랑 안 하고 항상 화장. 카페도 형 어디야? 이렇게 전화하면 오늘 저희 카페에 있잖아요. 그것도 아니고 커피숍. 이거 정말 이렇게 얘기해요. 커피숍? 나 그거 커피숍에 있어.
애늙은이 means like an old soul. So someone who's young but speaks and acts much older and more mature than their age. Basically someone that uses words that are a bit less trendy, a bit older or more proper Korean sounding. And in that clip, Kiyeon says that SHOWNU uses the words 화장 and 머리 instead of makeup and hair. Now, normally, if you're getting like your makeup or your hair done professionally, you can just use the word make-up, basically makeup, or hair for hair. However, the word makeup in Korean would be 화장, and hair is, of course, 머리. So if you're just using those words to talk about makeup in general, or to say that like your hair is long or short, then use those words instead. And Kiyeon also said that SHOWNU used the words 커피숍 instead of 카페 for a coffee shop. Now, 카페 is the common word nowadays, like a cafe, but 커피숍 can still be used. It's just more like the actual building, I guess, like a coffee shop versus calling it just a cafe.
저는 카페에서
정답 공부. 저 조금 잘못됐어. 미래장. 션우 카페라고 안 해요. 션우 커피숍이라고 그래요. 커피숍. 진짜 뻥 같죠? 진짜 커피숍이라고 해요. 션우.
And using those words instead on a regular basis would make him sound much older. However, I hate to be the one to burst this rumor about him speaking like an older person, but as far as I can tell, this is one of those things that's maybe exaggerated for television. Now, I tried my best to find examples of SHOWNU speaking like an older person or using older expressions or anything like that, but besides these sort of clips from the other members talking about him, SHOWNU himself speaks, not surprisingly, just like someone born in 1992. In that clip that I shared, he's using the word 파이팅, which is the correct way to say let's go or, keep it up in casual speech. But most people who are a bit older than him still more often use the technically incorrect but more common version, 화이팅. Now, it's possible that in SHOWNU's private life that he does use older vocabulary words and expressions, but that's not something that I can verify. So if you have any examples of him using older or less common expressions, I'd be really interested to hear those, so please do send them my way. Now, what I did find, though, is plenty of times where he uses modern slang words and expressions, so you're still going to be learning natural, common Korean if you're copying what he says, or say using him for something like shadowing practice. Like, for example, I have a short clip where he uses a recent word in Korean, TMI, which in Korean literally just means too much information. And it's only used for talking about something that's like, it's too much uninteresting information, basically. And it doesn't have the meaning of like uncomfortable information that we use it for in English. So here's that clip.
이게 떨어지지 않는 그런 벨트였어. TMI.
However, I also found one reason why he might not be a perfect speaker if you're a beginner who's looking for listening practice. And that would be his voice tone.
X 페스티벌 스텝 컨셉으로 사진 촬영을 했는데요. 피사체가 달라지는 건 좋지만 어떻게 나왔는지는 결과물로 봐야 될 것 같아요. 몬베베를 맞이하게 되는데 사람이 변하진 않지만 좋은 사람이 되고 싶으면 어쩔 수 없는 것 같아요.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to point this out. I'm sure that anyone who's heard SHOWNU speak at all has noticed this as well, but his voice is low. Compared to most other Korean speakers too, it's pretty low. And I picked that clip on purpose to show that his voice is so low that you can barely hear him underneath the music. Now, while I think that his low voice sounds cool and it makes him kind of sound like tough, it might be a problem for beginners because it's harder to hear what he's saying. Now, he's not the first person I've analyzed with a low voice. He's not even the only member in MONSTA X with a low voice. But I will give you the same advice that I often give for understanding other Korean speakers with a low voice like this, and that's to just turn up the volume, maybe wear headphones when you're listening to him.
네, 보고 6월호 타임홈과 함께한 션우의 생일이 또 있는 달이기도 합니다. 그래서 많이 사랑해 주시고요. 화보 살색이 좀 많은데요.
And this is because speakers with a low voice like SHOWNU also have a lower volume. So fortunately, you have this option. However, if you were to meet someone like that in person, your best bet would be just to get as close to them as you can and then tilt your ear toward them when they're speaking. I mean, don't do this for SHOWNU because you'll probably get pushed away by his security, but I mean for your friends with low voices.
아, 부끄럽진 않아. 부를 땐 안 부끄러웠는데 들을 때 부끄러워. 그래서 괜찮아.
Besides his relatively low voice, though, he's mostly still okay for listening practice. But you still might want to keep the Korean subtitles on when he speaks because he does sometimes speak rather quickly and slur his sentences a bit. And I have a clip for that here.
그치. 나온 지 일주일밖에 안 되는데. 나는 그거 안 느껴본 지 한 4년 된 것 같아.
He's not slurring his speech that much, though, just a little bit, and he doesn't even do it the most among the members, as you'll see later. But if you're a beginner, these two things will make it harder to translate what he's saying. Finally, though, here's one more reason why you might want to use him for listening practice. So I know I said 2 reasons why you might not to, but a good thing, though, is if you're okay with those 2 points, something that's really good is his intonation. Now, intonation is basically if you just imagine someone's voice like going up and down, kind of like a wave. I have a clip here to show you, so I just want you to pay attention here to how is his voice going up and down in his sentences.
하늘도 맑고 이렇게 항상 해가 질 때 이렇게 노을 지는 게 되게 예쁘더라고요. 그래서 케이크에 이렇게 약간 노을을 좀 넣어서 제가 만들지는 않았지만 그냥 의견만 냈습니다.
SHOWNU's speech goes up and down fairly smoothly, I'd say. There aren't any like sharp peaks, and it doesn't even go up really high. And that's a good thing if you're using him for listening practice because a lot of Korean speakers don't do this. But it mostly follows the kind of default intonation that you'll hear on TV or on the radio, which is pretty standard for people who were born and raised in Seoul. And despite his low voice tone and occasionally slurring his speech a little bit, this sort of like clear, like really clear intonation helps him to still be mostly easy to understand, at least for, someone who's past the beginner level. And I have another example here of his intonation as well.
네, 컨셉은 이제 이번 앨범도 똑같은 모양이고 이렇게 촤라락 펼쳐집니다. 예, 메인 사진인 것 같고요. 여기도 구성품이 포스터, 예, 똑같은 메인 포스터고요.
The part that I want to focus on is this sentence. He says, 이번 앨범도 똑같은 모양이고 이렇게 촤라락 펼쳐집니다. Now, that means this album also looks the same as this and unfolds connected like this.
이번 앨범도 똑같은 모양이고 이렇게 촤라락 펼쳐집니다.
And this intonation here might not look like much, but this is very smooth, almost default Korean intonation. The start of the word will go up a bit and then at the end go back down. And you can really see this sort of thing on like short words like 똑같은 and 이렇게, which go up and then back down. And then you can really see it at the very end of his sentence. He just has a falling intonation, like where he says, 펼쳐집니다. It just all goes down. And these things make his intonation sound calm and smooth. Okay, anyway, next I want to talk about how SHOWNU speaks with the other members, specifically how he uses polite speech. So I have a clip here of that first.
야 나도 궁금하다.
몬스타엑스 첫 1위 했을 때 음악 방송에서 현우 형이 울었어.
Basically, SHOWNU does not use polite speech to the other members because he doesn't have to. And the other members, and in this clip you saw Juhan, the other members for the most part also don't use polite speech toward him either. And this is kind of normal, but it's not normal for regular Korean society. So to keep things here as brief as possible, in regular friendships in Korea, you're still supposed to only use 존댓말, meaning polite speech, toward your friends who are older than you. And by older in Korean culture, it's determined by what year you were born. So in this example I gave you, Juhan was born in 1994 and SHOWNU was born in 1992. So according to cultural norms, Juhan would not be able to speak using 반말, meaning casual speech, towards someone older like SHOWNU. So if you're Korean and your Korean friend was born just 1 year earlier than you, you'll still use polite speech to that friend, most likely. The other friend, though, can use 반말 to the younger friend, but not the other way around. Now, there are exceptions to this, the first exception being between family members, and another common exception is if you have permission from the older friend to speak casually with each other. For example, you could ask an older friend, say someone you kind of feel close with now, but you've been speaking casually up until now, you could ask them something like, 우리 말 놓을까요? Literally, shall we lower our speech? Or you could just ask like, 말 편하게 할까요? Literally, shall we just speak comfortably? And there are a bunch of variations on these expressions. And in this case, although there still is that 형 and 동생 relationship, meaning the older brother and the younger brother, all 6 of the members made the choice to, for most of the part, to speak casually to each other. And what this tells me is that the members all see each other as more like just family members and not just as friends. And now I will say not every group that I've seen chooses to speak like this, so that's why I wanted to point it out. Okay, next is, let's talk about some of SHOWNU's filler words, because he does use some filler words, and they're just words that fill space, and they don't really have too much meaning. For example, a really common filler word that you'll just hear lots of Koreans use is the word 이제, meaning now. And SHOWNU uses this word too.
네, 그래서 이제 오늘 이제 곰돌이가 이제 불독티를 입고 있는데 사실 좀 부족해요. 여기 이제 불독티의 완성은 이제 굉장히 타이트한 비니까지 이제 들어가죠. 사실 저는 이제 오랜만에 오긴 했는데 팬분들 그동안 이제 멤버들이랑 뭔가
Literally, the word 이제 means now, but when it's being used just to fill space, so as a filler word, you can kind of think of it as saying like, so now, or and now, like that. And he uses this word a bit more than the other filler words, but not excessively.
아 저거 이제 저 얘기 있어. 이제 어머니 할머니 이거 하는 안무가 있는데 이제 나랑 기현이는 이거 손을 돌린다.
Again, this is not excessive. 2 or 3 times in a sentence every now and then it's noticeable, but it's really not out of the ordinary for Korean speakers. However, he also uses another filler word. Actually, I won't tell you what it is. Just see if you can find it.
제가 좀 채팅창을 좀 멀리 했으니까 다시 좀 소통을 해볼까요? 아 그림 좀 괜찮나요? 보고 그리는 건 제가 좀 해요. 근데
It's 좀. Just like 이제, SHOWNU uses the word 좀 a little bit more than the other filler words I found, but it's also not excessive. The word 좀 means a little bit, and it is a shorter version of the regular word 조금. However, 좀 can also be used as a filler word just to make the sentence sound a little bit less direct. So it's kind of like adding the word kinda or sorta. And SHOWNU really likes using this word because it makes his speech sound softer. And that's one of the other things that I noticed actually, is that SHOWNU seems to really like speaking softly. Now, not just his voice and his tone or everything, but also the words that he chooses. So he often picks words or a grammar that sound a bit more refined, a bit softer, and his voice tone and his intonation is stable, and all of this stuff put together makes him sound really calm and mature, and he sounds like he has a lot of self-control. Does that make sense? Which I think though is a good fit for him being the oldest member and the leader. It's just something interesting that I noticed.
요즘 연말에
요즘 is not one of his filler words. I just thought that clip was kind of funny. Okay, so that's enough about his speech, but I'm not done talking about his Korean. We still need to look at SHOWNU's handwriting because you can tell, I think, a lot about someone by how they write. So I have a couple of examples, and the first one is a letter that SHOWNU wrote to mon-bebe in 2021 when he was in the military. Now, if you're a beginner at first glance, this might look next to impossible to read, but let me spend the next several minutes defending his writing. He actually writes pretty nicely, except for a few mistakes I'll point out. First, though, the good. He writes with proper stroke order, so the order that you're supposed to write the letters. He writes efficiently, and all of his syllables look balanced, so that's good. His stroke order is, in fact, the reason why this letter is still legible at all, because if you know the correct order to write the letters yourself, then you can more easily follow the pen, how it's moving, and you can kind of figure out what someone wrote, even if you can't read it otherwise. If you don't know stroke order, though, a lot of this will probably look like scribbles. And I think that a good part of the letter that shows this is the sentence where he says, 그래도 오늘도 mon-bebe 뽕이 차서 편지를 쓰고 있네요. Which is, still I'm writing a letter today because I'm filled with mon-bebe's love.
사랑한다, mon-bebe.
I found so many clips of them flirting with their fan base. Okay, so he wrote every syllable in this letter efficiently by going as fast as he can, but also keeping his pen close to the page and still following stroke order. Specifically, look at this part where he wrote 뽕이 차서. You can see in the word 차서 that the 서 part is written by first writing the 시옷, that's the S letter, and then the vowel 어. And he's connected the end of the S letter into the O part, so it almost looks like two mountains. And right after that, he writes the word 편지. Now, this letter here, the first letter, doesn't even really look like a piup. That's the P letter. And if you know the stroke order for piup, it's perfectly readable though. And then he kept his pen on the page when he started to draw the bottom horizontal line. So all of this makes it look really messy at first glance, and honestly, it's not a clean way to write this letter, but again, because he followed the stroke order, it's still correct and it's still perfectly legible. The vowel that's next to this also, in 편지, the 여 vowel, is also done in the same way by drawing those two short horizontal lines, the top one and then the bottom one quickly. So that way the tail of the top horizontal stroke connects with the start of the bottom horizontal stroke. Anyway, if you learn the stroke order of the letters, you could also write all of your letters like this too, and it'll also help you to read things more easily. In fact, I do most of these same things that he does in my handwriting, especially how he writes the word pop here. He writes this the same way that I write it. Normally though, the piup letter, which is the B, is supposed to be written with 4 separate strokes, but in order to save time, a lot of people just write this as like one vertical line going down and then a second vertical line to the right of that, which curves back up. And this is not the official stroke order for it, but this sort of stroke order it's really common. It's so common that you should also learn it and be able to recognize it. And this is the same way that I write piup, and it helps me to keep my writing looking smooth even when I'm moving quickly. Okay, so those are some of the interesting things about his letter, but I also found some mistakes. I will say though that the mistakes I found, I think were just a result of him rushing. For example, in the previous sentence where he wrote the word 그래도, you can see the 도 part is really messy. And he also had to write over it, as well as the next word, 오늘도. So, I mean, I can see why he did that because he was rushing too much, but that does make it more difficult to tell which letter it's supposed to be, because when he was writing the D letter, 디귿, you can see he like rushed into writing the vowel below it, the O. And you can see actually he writes the 디귿 in that same way in a lot of other words too. And there's another spot where he also writes that letter, 디귿, the D letter. Look at the word 식단표. So look at the syllable 단, the second syllable in it. The 디귿 there that's at the top left is normally a horizontal stroke from left to right, and then you draw the letter nian, which is the N letter right below that. But here he connected it into the vowel ah. However, since it's not connecting to a vowel that's below it, here it's on the side of it, I think it's still a lot easier to recognize. So that's why he didn't mess up here, but he did mess up with the O vowel. So anyway, I don't know how interested you are in these sorts of little things, but those are just a few examples of things that he does and some shortcuts with that he does at least repeatedly with a lot of his letters. And finally, I mentioned that his writing it looks balanced. And what I mean by that is his syllables overall are not shape-shifting much. Each syllable takes up about the same amount of space as the next one. There aren't like syllables here taking up double what the next one does, or sometimes what I see other people do is they'll like stretch out their syllables, but his here are mostly similar. And doing this sort of thing takes a lot of practice. But the key to doing this is that when you're writing, you need to pay attention to what's known as syllable blocks. Now, there are 6 different syllable blocks in Korean, which are basically like guidelines for where you can place consonants and vowels in a syllable. So like if you have one consonant and one vowel and it's a vertical vowel, then, well, they're going to go side by side like this, or if it's a horizontal vowel, etc. And I would just recommend reviewing these sorts of syllable blocks while you're practicing writing, because as long as you balance your letters around these patterns, these blocks, they're going to naturally end up similar sized. So that's what he does, and that's why they look nice. Okay, really quick though, I have one more short letter that I also want to look at before we finish. And that is a letter from 2025, and the letters look mostly identical to the letter that we saw from 2021. So here he got better at connecting the letter tigat with the vowel o, so that's good. It means that he's now paying a little bit more attention to his writing and trying to improve it. I'll read just one more line here. He says, 10주년이 되는 해라 좀 더 기대가 되는데요. So it's our 10th year anniversary, so I'm looking forward to it a little bit more. And this was, of course, since it was 2025, it was their 10th year anniversary since they debuted. And you can see here that he wrote the word 좀 as well, as fast as he could. And the letter 지읒, that's the J letter, flows right into the vowel O. So 좀, like that. Nothing really new here. I'm just doing this to show you that it's still his preferred style of writing. He hasn't changed how he writes. So if you find yourself having to follow the stroke of every single syllable, then it's probably SHOWNU's writing.
감사합니다. 안녕.
Okay, and I could keep going on, but I still have 5 more members to analyze, so that's enough for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, and if you're interested in the Korean language, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more content. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters as well as my YouTube channel members for helping to keep the lights on in here. Check out my Patreon page. I'll have a link to that in the video description below if you'd also like to help support my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time where I'll cover 민혁. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!